Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we can start today. Let's say the first session in today's agenda is about the peace, security, mediation in a polarized world. And we have here a very strong list of the very influential and very experienced personalities which during their political life lived and worked with peace, security, and mediation. So we will start with Mr. Lajcak, Miroslav, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Slovakia, was the President on 72nd session of the UN General Assembly, was the High Representative in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was the most important for me. One of the favorites. So, Miroslav, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. It's really good to meet and discuss in this environment of people who have the wisdom and experience and at the same time the freedom to speak up what they really think. You don't have to be loyal to any institutions or particular country, and hopefully we can generate some ideas that can help us to overcome the current very difficult situation, because as we know, the world order as we knew it and the one we believed in no longer exists. That is very clear. What is not clear is what comes after. Right now, we live in a world without rules, and the only rule that applies is might is right. Global institutions designed for mediation, such as starting with the United Nations, but also regional bodies such as OSCE and others, are polarized and therefore paralyzed by veto politics, selective enforcement, and other reasons. So why is it so? First, I see three main reasons. Number one, the world has changed over years. The new centers of powers emerged, new economic powerhouses emerged, but this was not reflected in the global architectures. The winners of the World War II, who dominated the global system, refused to step back and make room for new powers to make the system more fair and representative. And this has damaged the credibility of international architecture, as it was continuously losing the necessary legitimacy. Number two, another mistake was that we stopped using the potential of international organizations as platforms for dialogue and problem solving, and took the real negotiations out of international organizations, replacing them with the different kind of what was called coalition of the willings, groupings that lacked proper mandate and thus legitimacy, and who usually consisted only of like-minded countries. So if you are part of the solution, but I don't like your views, I don't invite you to be part of the solution, and therefore there is never a solution, obviously. And finally, and this is what I consider particularly painful, we eliminated the dialogue, which I consider, and I'm sure that many of us, the key instrument of diplomacy. I saw this before my eyes throughout my career, how the role of dialogue has degraded and deteriorated. What we have instead is the policy of not talking to those who don't think like us. And this is particularly present in the European Union. So we made this decision with regard to Russia in 2014, and we ended up having a war in Ukraine as a consequence of not having a dialogue and not addressing the problems between 2014 and 2022. And the list of countries we don't talk to because we disagree with their views keeps growing. Currently, no EU representative can talk to any representative of Georgia. So how are we going to address the issues there without talking? Don't ask me. I don't understand that. So as a consequence, we witness less and less dialogue and cooperation and more tensions and conflicts. Today's conflicts are not only military and political failures, but first of all, failures of trust, legitimacy, and dialogue. Instead of talking to or with each other, we talk at or about the others, while being closed in our own echo chamber. And this is the reality, the sad reality of last years. And here I should also mention the role or the negative role of social media. It is very difficult to reach a compromise solution nowadays because compromise is not popular in the social media sphere. You work hard to reach a win-win solution, and next day you are crucified on social media for not being principled enough, for giving in your values. And therefore, some political actors prefer to kill the deal, or most of the political actors, unfortunately, instead of going for a reasonable compromise, or they act as if the main purpose is to please the social media rather than to painfully seek a mutually acceptable solution. I like the quote from Ronald Reagan, who said, "I would rather go for 80% of what I wanted to achieve instead of jumping over the cliff with my flag proudly waving." And I think we are doing exactly the opposite today. So the question is, how can we find a solution to a problem if we don't talk to the party which is part of the problem? I don't understand that. And I also like the quote by Nelson Mandela, who said, "If you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner." Easy and logical. However, we just don't do it. We do exactly the opposite. So what shall we do? Certainly not wait for President Trump's next move and comment on it. We can and shall do more. To begin with, we need to insist on proven ways of promoting peace and stability. First, engage in a genuine dialogue, particularly with non-like-minded. Because if we resign or give up on the dialogue, we have resigned on diplomacy. Number two, engage non-state actors, local leaders, civil society. Number three, create informal channels that allow parties to explore off-ramps without political costs. Number four, and this is, I think, particularly relevant here, use former leaders who are free from electoral pressures, geopolitical alignment, and therefore can fully use their wisdom and experience and to speak up the truth. And in general, promote track two diplomacy. That means involve all those who can be useful, including the business leaders, religious leaders, women, youth, not to substitute for formal negotiations processes, not to compete, but to support and complement track one, the official channels. Because there are things you can only do through official channels, but there are also things that you cannot do through official channels, but you can use these unofficial track two channels. It's really important not to forget that peace is not sustainable when those who will live with it the longest are consulted the last. I also think that the people and countries who believe in multilateralism and international law, and I believe it is the majority of countries, should take the initiative to start talking about the new, more just and more fair world architecture. We should stop watching and commenting what President Trump is doing, and we should try to offer an alternative to it. So in other words, let's do something and let's do it differently. Old approaches will produce old results. Because in a polarized world, peace will not be rebuilt by institutions. It will be rebuilt by courageous people, courageous dialogue, often informal, sometimes invisible, but always grounded in trust and goodwill. And in that sense, the independent diplomacy, which is one of the topics of this panel, is no longer a complement to official efforts, but it is a necessity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miro. Thank you for your, I believe, enough inspiring introduction to some other members. Maybe there will be some other comments also later, but we'll see that now. The next, and I suppose same interesting participant is Amre Moussa, very well-known figure within the UN institutions, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt and the former Secretary General of the Arab League. So, Amre, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, reading the title of this session, Peace, Security, and Mediation in a Polarized World, which means that in a polarized world, peace is threatened, security is precarious, and mediation means nothing. And in fact, observing what was and still is going on in the UN, mediation has become a tool not to solve problems, but to manage problems. Managing the problems always happens to serve the interests of big powers or stronger sides in conflicts. So mediation and other tools of intervention in order to build peace have become, in fact, tools to make reaching peace impossible. You remember Kashmir? How many efforts, mediation, intervention, peaceful intervention, working groups, etc., and Kashmir is still there, as if we are in the first or second week of that problem. Palestine, the same. So, in fact, the failure in the architecture, peace architecture in the UN came much earlier than our days now, because it was meant to use all those tools, including mediation, etc., to militate in favor of big powers and stronger powers. Therefore, mediation has lost its credibility, even its role or necessity. The managing problems and crises without the intention of solving them. Without the intention of solving them. The intention has become how to manage them and keep them there, because we might use them in so many things in our competition, our rivalry with the other power on the level of superpowers, big powers, and other powers. And this is one of the most serious things, negative things that have happened to the international system, to the multilateral system. I believe that this issue should be put on the table for all of us as the international civil society. The peace and security structure in the United Nations is falling, has no meaning nowadays. How to revive that is our duty. And I think that it is getting more difficult to solve problems through mediation. In the so-called Middle East now, we have a glaring example about Palestine and Israel. There have been so many mediations. Now, the mediation or the efforts to establish peace and quiet, not peace, but just quiet, is how to rebuild Gaza. And first priorities in building Gaza is to build casinos. Is this serious? A place that has been totally destroyed. First thing we build should be hospitals, should be schools, should be houses, should be services. But this is not what we are talking about. It is not what they are talking about. Therefore, I believe that the issue of mediation or peace efforts will have to be put before the international community, in particular the civil society, to say its word. It has lost its meaning. There is no mediation in a polarized world. Mediation in such a world would be put in the service of those big powers that form the polarized world. This is part of the negative situation in which we are. And therefore, I believe that we have to reconsider this and to suggest to the board and the secretariat of NGIC to put this matter as an item, important item, priority item, in the Baku, in the next coming Baku Forum meetings in March. The absence or the misuse of the tools for peace that have been established by the Charter of the UN. The mediation has lost its meaning, its substance. It has been used to serve the policies, the interests of big powers. This is the problem. Problems in Africa, in the Sahel, in the Horn of Africa, in Sudan, in Somalia, in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, everywhere. They continue. Even they escalate. And there are a lot of mediations going on. And this is something that we have to ponder. Another thing is, are we really serious when we agree to establish a process of mediation in a certain conflict, knowing that it will be polarized itself? That process itself will be polarized. No, this is a challenge to us, to the credibility of the system and the credibility of next system. If we are to address the issue of multilateralism and how to clean it up, prepare it to get back with force in managing our community, international community, in the 21st century and beyond, we'll have to address and be brave when we get to talk about the elements that have been written before in the Charter and in the performance of the Security Council, which is also falling apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Amre. Now, Peter, the floor is yours. We
Thank you
would
very
like
much.
to hear your advice, what to do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It is difficult to speak after Amre Moussa, our doyen and close friend of all of us, but I'm going to try to do that. So how to achieve peace and security is perhaps the most difficult question humanity has faced from centuries. However, the current challenges have found both our societies and our political leaders equally unprepared, and this could be the problem. It seems to me that one of the great difficulties now is the general shift in the paradigm for explaining the world today. The general shift of the paradigm. I spent half of my life during the Cold War. It was not easy, but the paradigm to explain the world at the time was relatively simple. The gigantic competition between the two huge blocs led by Americans and the former Soviet Union. One was the home of free market economy, the rule of law, with an increasing leadership in technological development, and the other one, a world of ideological and political dictatorship, closed borders, and a low standard of living. The end of the Cold War led to unjustified optimism, which, however, didn't lead to the so-called end of history. In any case, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the new paradigm for the world was built on two main pillars: the undisputed role of the United States as the only superpower, and secondly, on our belief that democracy will be built almost everywhere, including in Russia, which would be the strongest guarantee of peace and security, not only in Europe. And this was extremely important for all of us, Eastern European countries. Kremlin war against Ukraine killed all illusions about Russia's inclusion in the free and democratic world based on the rule of law and human rights, where borders are not changed by force. And to complicate the global political picture even more, President Trump stunned the world with the recent special operation in Venezuela and the statement of the American intentions towards Greenland. Of course, the US operation in Venezuela cannot be compared to Russia's war against Ukraine. as it lasted 4 hours without army invasion or occupying foreign territories. Nevertheless, even some of the closest allies of the United States drew attention to the importance of respecting international law and its values. So, speaking about paradigms, should we find a new paradigm now? Because the global environment has changed with dramatic speed. Today, 35 years after the lifting of the Iron Curtain, more and more people are asking themselves the question, does America continue to be the undisputed economic and political hegemon? And what is even more important, can we rely on America as the only broker in international relations? In the face of a great fracture in the system of global governance, to quote the United Nations Secretary General. Paradoxically, now it seems more difficult to pass anything through the United Nations than it was during the Cold War. Even at times of great clashes between the United States and the Soviet Union, the superpowers managed to cooperate. Strangely enough, they even managed to sign several very important and even binding UN treaties on the Antarctic, on space, on arms control, etc., etc. For sure, people from my generation, we have no reason to experience nostalgia for the Cold War. But faced with new realities, we must admit that our expectations for a world based on mutual understanding, inclusion, and cooperation are under threat. I mentioned already the war in Ukraine, and I immediately want to highlight the attempts of the United States and President Trump to find a peaceful solution to it. However, this is proving to be extremely difficult. And the question is, should we seek more active participation of more players in order to go back to a world based on international law and common efforts for solving global challenges? No doubt, in the face of what is happening today, people have less time to worry about global warming, global poverty, global health, etc., etc. And by the way, ironically, the global warming is among the main reasons for President Trump's ambitions towards Greenland, because as a result of global warming, this island and the ocean routes around it have become more and more approachable. I remember that 2 years ago, during the Davos Forum, a white paper dedicated to the middle powers stated that middle powers could be key to realizing the vision for a new multipolar global order. Since then, we have discussed this many times, but perhaps right now is the time for them to step in. Why middle powers? Because of the weight and influence of these countries in their respective regions. And secondly, because of the strong support of middle countries for multilateralism. We have discussed that many times. The majority of middle-sized countries believe that multilateral institutions are crucial for handling international issues. They actively participate in regional organizations and are frequently at the forefront of initiatives to bolster international organizations, something especially important in the face of recent US withdrawing from so many international organizations and initiatives. In this sense, middle power diplomacy could be a possible answer to the question asked in this panel: what role can independent diplomacy and dialogue platforms play in rebuilding peace architecture? In today's world of deals promoted by President Trump, bargaining power will play a crucial role. In the past, great powers used their armies and markets to create spheres of influence, where they could intervene almost without limit. But in today's world, India, by the way, calls this world multi-alignment world, middle powers can reach agreements with great powers and with one another for different purposes. India can bargain with Japan and Australia and the United States for enhanced security, with Russia for oil and gas, and with Singapore for green energy, for example. Trump's slogan of America First helps middle powers to follow a similar model. Why not? As a result of global confrontation, political cooperation is also or has to be transferred to the regions where shared historical backgrounds, cultural traditions, and border trade interactions create much more conditions for understanding and trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Our next speaker is Anna Birchall. She was Deputy Prime Minister of Romania, former, and the Minister of Justice, and currently Presidential Advisor. No, sorry. So, former. So, Anna, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's such a great honor to be again with you, and please allow me to wish you all the best for this year, for you and your families and loved ones. It is a great honor for me to join you today to reflect on one of the most defining challenges of our generation: how to rebuild peace architectures in a world where polarization is deepening, conflicts are multiplying, and the mechanisms of ones we relied on for conflict resolutions are increasingly fragile. In a world that feels increasingly divided by ideology, geography, and interests, the imperative for peace has never been greater. From the ongoing war in Ukraine on our European doorstep to the protracted crisis in the Middle East and the persistent conflicts across Africa, we are now witnessing a troubling pattern: escalating tensions, weakened institutions, and the erosion of trust, both within societies and between states. The traditional tools of diplomacy, as we were talking earlier, and including in this panel and yesterday, formal negotiations, UN resolutions, and state-to-state mediation often struggle to keep pace with the complexity of modern conflicts. Hybrid warfare, proxy involvement, disinformation, and deep-stated mistrust have weakened the effectiveness of conventional conflict resolutions architectures. Yes, aimed this polarization, I firmly believe that there is a vital role for independent diplomacy and dialogue platforms such as NGAC to rebuild bridges and restore trust. We must revitalize preventive diplomacy as our first line of defense. Prevention is not passive, it is proactive. It means identifying flashpoints early, fostering inclusive conversations between tensions escalate, and investing in early warning systems that listen to local voices. Preventive diplomacy must once again become a cornerstone of international engagement. Too often, the world mobilizes only after conflict erupts, when lives are already lost and when divisions have already hardened. We must reverse this logic. Preventing diplomacy requires political courage, the courage to act early, to invest in dialogue before tensions become irreversible, and to put long-term stability and peace above short-term political gain. It also requires credibility. As I learned throughout my time in public service, credibility is earned throughout consistency, throughout having the courage to say the truth, even when it's not fashionable, standing firm on principles even under pressure, especially when it would be easier to look away. In Europe, we have seen how preventive measures, such as sustained dialogue with Western Balkans, for example, have helped avert relapse into violence. But we need more: stronger regional mechanisms and a renewed commitment to diplomacy that anticipates rather than reacts. This is why former leaders and track to diplomacy become indispensable. And I have here to commend the NGIC, Rozhvan, and the staff, but very importantly, President Aliyev of Azerbaijan. By putting together this wealth, I don't think there is any other network in the world with such a rich wealth, with this incredible knowledge and network, which I think NGIC now should, and it is including through those discussions and meetings that we have, such as the one today in Geneva, to really contribute with substance and with our individual and collectively wealth to the world peace, because the world is turbulent. And again, I want to commend President of Azerbaijan and Azerbaijan and NJIC for really getting us together and looking after this network so well and growing it each year. So those who have held high offices like you here today, presidents, prime ministers, foreign ministers, ministers, people from all across the other domains, you know, UNESCO and so name it, it has an incredible, as I said, not just experience, but credibility and networks. Freedom from the constraints to official positions, as it was mentioned earlier, they can engage in discreet, flexible conversation that official channels sometimes cannot, simply cannot. And this is a reality, and we need to address this. Preventive diplomacy is failing not because it is outdated, but because it is underused. Too many times it was waited until crisis explored and then someone pretended to be surprised. We must flip the script. Diplomacy must be faster than disinformation, more resilient than political ego, and more courageous than fear. Acting early is not weakness. It is a strategy, it is leadership, and actually it is courage. When official channels freezes, independent diplomacy and track to initiatives become the oxygen of peace efforts. Let me be blunt about it, and I say this as someone who has lived throughout high-stakes negotiations. Sometimes the most productive talks are the ones no one tweets about. It can be tested ideas, build trust, and unlock doors that formal diplomacy alone cannot. Track to diplomacy can bring people to the table before they are ready to face the cameras. In a polarized world, track to diplomacy is not a substitute for track one. It is a powerful complement that opens doors often when official paths appear blocked. And I stress appeared. Crucially, we must place women and youth at the heart of peace building. Women are not just victims of conflict, they are essential architects of sustainable peace. Research consistently shows that peace agreements involving women are more durable and comprehensive. I'm sorry to say to you, gentlemen and my friends, but that's a reality. And same with the youth, similar with the youth. Youth people represents the future, of course. They bring fresh perspectives, digital savvy, and a stake in long-term stability. Platforms that empower youth throughout education, exchange programs, and leadership training can transform them from bystanders into active mediators and peacemakers, and quite frankly, more effective than any of us individually and collectively. In conclusion, rebuilding global peace architectures requires courage, creativity, and collaboration. We must revive preventive diplomacy, harness the unique value of former leaders and track to channels, and ensure that women and youth are not on the margins but leading the way. Romania has always believed in dialogue over division. Let us recommit to that spirit together. Let us invest, including in the quiet, persistent work of mediation that prevents tomorrow's headlines from becoming today's tragedies. Peace is possible, but only if we act now, inclusively, and with determination. In a polarized world, neutrality is not enough. Silence certainly is not enough. Statements are for sure not enough. What we need now is courage, moral courage, diplomatic courage, human courage. Courage to speak when it is easier to stay quiet. Courage to prevent conflict instead of managing disaster. Because the truth is simple. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of people brave enough to stop it. We can rebuild a global peace architecture, but only if we rebuild trust, credibility, and dialogue first. We need institutions that are respected, leaders who are consistent, mediators who are independent, and societies that refuse to be manipulated, including into hate. The world, yes, is polarized, but that's not a surprise. But polarization is not destiny. It is a choice, and so is peace. So let us choose wisely, let us choose courage, and for sure, let us choose peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Our next speaker is the former president of Slovenia, my good friend, and someone who was very much involved in trying to achieve a peace in the whole Western Balkan region. Borut.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, colleagues and friends. We're living in an age of profound contradiction. Never before we have been so connected by technology, trade, and shared global challenges. And yet, never before have we seemed so divided. Polarization has become the defining feature of our time, between nations and within them, between ideologies, identities, and narratives of truth itself. Peace is no longer simply the absence of war. Security is no longer only about borders and armies, and mediation is no longer a quiet process happening behind closed doors. It is a skill that society must now relearn at every level. Polarization is often treated as a political inconvenience or a social problem. In reality, it is a security threat. When societies fracture into us versus them, trust erodes. Institutions lose legitimacy. Dialogue becomes impossible. And once dialogue disappears, violence, whether physical, structural, or psychological, finds fertile ground. We see this globally in armed conflicts driven by identity and grievance, in democracies paralyzed by extreme partisanship, in communities divided by misinformation and fear, in an international system where cooperation is replaced by zero-sum thinking. Polarization does not begin with weapons. It begins with language, with narratives that dehumanize, with the slow normalization of exclusion. If we are serious about peace and security, we must recognize that preventing conflict today must addressing polarizations early. One of the most alarming symptoms of polarization is, as everybody has been said, the collapse of dialogue. We no longer argue to understand, we argue to win. We no longer listen to respond thoroughly, we listen to react. Social media algorithms reward outrage, political incentives reward division, media ecosystems reward simplicity over profound analysis. In such an environment, mediation becomes not just a diplomatic tool, but a civic necessity. Mediation is the art of holding space for disagreement without allowing it to become destruction. It is the discipline of slowing down conflict long enough for humanity to re-enter the room. And yet, mediation today is undervalued, underfounded, and often misunderstood as weakness. Mediation is not appeasement. Dialogue is not a surrender. Listening is not agreement. They are acts of courage, as has been just said, in a world addiction to confrontation. At the heart of peace, security, and mediation lies a single fragile resource, and this is trust. Trust between citizens and governments, trust between communities, and finally, trust between nations. Polarization thrives where trust has collapsed. And trust cannot be rebuilt through force, propaganda, or denial. Trust is rebuilt through transparency, accountability, inclusion, consistent ethical leadership. Mediation helps rebuild trust by creating processes that are fair, respectful, and inclusive. In fact, research shows that people are more likely to accept difficult compromises if they believe the process itself was just. This is a critical lesson for peace building in a polarized age. Process matters as much as outcome. At the global level, we face the international system under immense strain. Multilateral institutions are questioned, international law is selectively applied, power politics is resurging. In this environment, mediation is often sidelined in favor of big powers. But without dialogue, nothing can be resolved. The conflicts freezes, and often they are becoming even more dangerous. Global peace requires respect for international norms, genuine multilateral engagement, and mediation mechanisms that are impartial and trusted. Importantly, mediators themselves must adapt. Credibility today depends not only on neutrality, but on moral consistency. Double standards destroy trust. A polarized world demands mediators who are principled, patient, and prepared to speak uncomfortable truths to all sides. At the heart of peace, we stand at the crossroads. One path leads deeper into polarization, toward hardened identities, insecurity, and normalized conflict. The other path is more difficult. It required patience, humility, and courage. It requires mediation, dialogue, and redefinition of security that places human dignity at its core. Peace is not passive. It is deliberate, disciplined choice made again and again, especially when it is hardest. In a polarized world, choosing peace is an act of resistance. Let me end with this thought. The future of peace will not be decided only by those with power, weapons, or loud voices. It will be shaped by those willing to listen when listening is unpopular, to mediate when mediation is dismissed, and to believe in shared humanity when divisions seems easier. Security without peace is fragile, peace without dialogue is temporarily, and dialogue without courage is meaningless. May we have the courage to choose mediation over escalation, understanding over certainty, and peace over the illusion of victory. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Borut. Borut, our next speaker is our French friend, always full of optimism. So I hope that his speech will go in a positive, optimistic direction. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President. Thank you very much to NJC also for inviting me on this panel. I am a Frenchman, but I'm especially a European, so I will respond as a European. And my few remarks, I have cut down lots of my remarks because most has already been said. Where does Europe fit in today in this new geopolitical surrounding? It seemed as if we are sort of wrecked between, on the one side, our more traditional adversaries, the former Soviet Union, now Russia, and suddenly we have popped up a new adversary or partner adversary. It's difficult to understand on our Western flank. So first of all, this new onslaught on Europe is extremely worrisome. I will not go through the list of what is expected as the global risks to Europe in 2026. You know them all. Basically, Russia's military strategic threat, the United States now distancing its strategic cultural dialogue from Europe, and of course, China with its overwhelming economic flood. I would like to say just two things. First of all, I believe in text, in wordings and text, written text. And I think we are making a big mistake in not reading what comes out. Out of Russia, there are three major texts that came out most recently. The first one is, of course, Sergei Karaganov, whom you know well, who wrote in a global, Russia in Global Affairs, when was that, in October, December, so the most recent issue, a quite impressive paper called Europe, a Bitter Parting. Now, I invite you to read this text. because he still remains very central to the thinking process within the Kremlin elites. And basically what Karaganov is saying is, after 300 years, Russia has now departed and is splitting away from Europe. What is also interesting is this idea that we have to win the future war. And this future war, we hope not to use, I quote, extreme measures. Now you can imagine what these types of extreme measures could be. And he also, of course, underlines that we are at the worst, historical being between Europe and Russia. So all this makes it extremely worrisome for Europeans who have been brought up culturally over many, many centuries, and actually again recently, that somehow Russia does belong to our European cultural sphere. The second paper, which I invite you to look at, is the Valdai discussion group, whom you know well likewise. They wrote a report not long ago in September on Dr. Chaos, or how to stop worrying and love the disorder. So it really builds upon also a little bit what Karaganov wrote, and they have set out a few postulates. The first one being that the world order cannot and can no longer be restored. Secondly, they also say chaos is fundamentally, unmanageable, and every actor is ultimately on its own. What is even more worrisome in the context of a UN building is that universalism and justice are dead, not to mention that military power is today the guarantee of survival. So this, of course, worrisome trend continues finally, which is maybe the most extraordinary, in the magazine of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, which came out in October. It's called International Life. You may be aware of this official magazine, with the title, I hope you are all seated, "Burn Everything Up to the Channel. Western countries are always better disposed to listen when Russian troops set foot in Paris or in Berlin." Now, these three texts, if you sort of put them together, give the impression that the guidance and the ideas flowing through the Kremlin, flowing through the foreign ministry to their diplomats, is quite clear. Of course, it's obviously a lot of propaganda, disinformation, all you wish, but still, these are written by serious people who have their inroads into policy decision-making. Now, faced with that, how do we live? How does Europe react? Well, originally, we would have thought that our closest allies since World War II and after 80 years would be the United States. But there again, suddenly we are left alone. And this is explicit in the recent US national security strategy. I'm sure you have all read it. I think many of you have maybe read it twice in order to understand exactly what was on the paper. So there again, we should read the documents and take them seriously. And what is more essential for me is that this national security strategy is not just a one-off. A little bit what may have happened with Vance at the Munich Security Conference. This is something written by teams who have gone through all the details, and this was reconfirmed by President Trump in his famous Politico interview on December 8th, which basically confirmed what the national security strategy mentioned. So on all this, where do we stand, Europe? Where do we stand? The most interesting case study, of course, and I won't go through it, is Greenland. Again, yesterday, just mention that. Yesterday, there was, of course, this famous meeting with the foreign ministers of Greenland and of Denmark. And the interpretation from the White House press office compared to the interpretation given by Denmark and Greenland was totally opposite. So where does the trust lie? Where can we understand what was really said and what was discussed? All this also makes me extremely worried. But one aspect of Greenland is the ideological underpinning of what's happening. I learned that recently. I wasn't really aware of all that. But behind Greenland, it's not just the minerals, it's not just oil. It is also behind that, some kind of intellectual, next great city in Greenland approach with Peter Thiel, with Praxis, with all these, Praxis is a sort of a startup that was created. It's interesting for libertarians who have mentioned that Greenland will be the showcase of their sort of techno-libertarian approach to the future. It is very serious. I wasn't aware, to be honest, of that aspect. Ken Howery is the new US ambassador to Denmark, and he was one of the co-founders of Praxis. He was with Peter Thiel and Musk in PayPal. Palantir Technologies is extremely present on this Greenland, dossier. So we have to be extremely careful. It's not just traditional geopolitics intermingled with the Greenland issue. It's all this techno-structural, technological republic approach, which I think, animates and fuels the Greenland issue, which we're witnessing today. Finally, Europe needs to respond, and I will finish very quickly on that. Can we retain our role? We made, of course, maybe a big mistake in the sense that Europe's power, as soft power, was its normative power. Now, this normative power we built over the last 30 to 40 years is no longer adapted today to what's happening in the strong-willed worlds of superpowers. Maybe we betted wrongly on this normative power. I don't believe it, but still, that's maybe some who would say so. But can we retain in this context our position as mediator? Because there's a lot of goodwill around the European project in the world, especially from middle powers. And so we need to retain this goodwill through many tools. Europe's wake-up call is there. We have listened to it, and we're hearing it, and we're responding. I won't go through the details of all the responses that have been given since a few months. But still, we hope that we will get through this with the help of those who wish to retain a multilateralism, where Europe has always been at the forefront, and it's one of its biggest defender, but still, we need to regain the tools in order to be at that level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. And our next speaker is the former member of the U.S. House of Representatives, Mr. Van Taylor. So I think majority of the participants will very carefully hear what is your opinion about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. I'm going to do a little bit of my Trump impression. I saw this crowd. It was great. It was incredible. It was going to be amazing. I loved it. You're going to love it. And I had lunch with the president of the White House, and he actually acted exactly the same way he acts in public. No difference. He's like, "You're going to love the wall. You're going to love it." So I'm very proud to be here with all of you. NGIC is an incredible organization, and I just want to say the world needs more of it. I come with a message of peace and hope. I am very proud that America, I believe, has been the greatest anti-colonial force in the world in the last 150 years. And particularly as a Marine, the Marines actually occupied Haiti, the Philippines, Cuba, Nicaragua. They're all their own countries. We gave them back. North Africa in the Second World War, Germany, Austria, South Korea, Iraq. I served in Iraq in 2003, Afghanistan, Kuwait. These are all independent countries. The United States generally, almost, for the last 150 years, has not had territorial designs. And I'm very proud of that heritage, and I hope that that continues. President Trump would come to you and tell you he is a man of peace. In the last year in Southeast Asia, he has brokered peace between Cambodia and Thailand. In Africa, he has brokered peace between Congo and Rwanda. In the subcontinent, he has brokered peace between Pakistan and India. In the Middle East, he has brokered peace between Israel and Hamas. In the Caucasus, he has brokered peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And he is trying mightily to broker peace in Ukraine. May not agree with with what I've described, but that is certainly how he would describe it. I'd also say that President Trump is a man of action. Recently announced selling weapons to Taiwan against a bellicose and belligerent China. He has asked the EU, South Korea, Japan to do more to defend themselves and not to rely solely on the United States to defend everybody. He has, even as he's asked other people to contribute more, he himself has asked the United States, and when I was in Congress, we voted for more spending for defense so that we could go around and do the things that we needed to do. A thorn in the side of the international community, I believe, for the last 30 years has been Iran's nuclear threat. President Trump eliminated that last summer. And I'll remind everyone that Iran has been a very aggressive and bellicose neighbor. They have started wars in Syria, Israel, Lebanon, and Yemen. They've attacked Saudi Arabia facilities. And in my own time in Iraq, I watched Iranian spies cross the border to try to destabilize that country. And they sent a lot of weapons into Iraq to continue that conflict there. President Trump has ended the criminal enterprise in Venezuela. I know there's some disagreements on that, but the people of Venezuela, by and large, are very ecstatic to have a new beginning and to end that criminal enterprise. There are hard times ahead for Venezuela. And then President Trump has attacked a UN designated sponsor of terror, ISIS, both defending Christians in Nigeria and also defending Christians defending people in Syria. On the proactive side, what I've heard President Trump say over and over again is he wants Europe to be able to defend itself. I think that's a reasonable expectation. A toothless Europe is not able to stand up for itself. And I think that if Europe can be and should be a peer, not just economically, but militarily, and if it is, I think your posture will be very different in how you think about the world. And I think that on some level, because you're dependent on the United States for protection, it's going to change how you do things. And I will say that President Trump, one thing that he has been very successful with is his effort to reindustrialize America. At the end of the Second World War, 50% of all industrial capacity lay within the United States. Today, that's 11%. China has gone from basically 0 to almost 30%. President Trump has, since his first presidency, U.S. factory construction has increased about 250%, and it's on track to go up another 400% this year. So new factory construction in the United States is absolutely taking place. The United States wants to make more of its own stuff. And we could do that through automation and by controlling our own supply chains and by reducing controlling supply chains and reducing transportation. I will point out that Russia continues to be extremely aggressive. For almost 1,000 years since the founding of the Duchy of Moscow in the 13th century. The Duchy of Moscow has gone from a small city-state to the largest nation on earth, yet it still continues to want to take over more countries. It still wants to be bigger than what it is. And I don't see any end to their ambitions. This is in stark contrast to the United States or to any country here today. I will point out what I see as a threat to Europe, and that is the size of the welfare state in Europe. The United States spends 42% on government of its GDP. The EU spends 50%. without spending enough money on defense. That difference, that 8% of GDP, is the difference of the U.S. is investing dramatically in new technologies. You can see that in the AI race, right? I mean, why is the United States spending so much money on AI? Because we have the money to spend. We have the money to invest. Why is that? Because we don't have a huge welfare state. So we're able to take the resources that Europe is putting into a welfare state, and we're putting that into new technologies and able to dominate in that space. And I'll also point out to you, I advise two private equity funds that the ESG requirements that you have put on your companies are onerous. And I was surprised last summer, I was raising money in Abu Dhabi, and surprised at the number of European families that have moved offices into the Middle East so that they can avoid the ESG requirements that Europe has put on itself because they are so onerous. And what I know as a Texan is that high taxes, high regulation, can crush the future. And I see that as a Texan watching Florida and Texas flourish while New York and California are losing population. And I see that as the United States grows relative to the EU. And again, I'm here because I think this is a great country. I'm here because I think this is a great world. And I think that I really appreciate the multilateralism and the approach that's going on here, and would be delighted to discuss any of these issues with you at any time. And I appreciate all the different perspectives in the room. And as we say in Texas politics, blessed are the brief, for they shall be reelected. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, I think it was very interesting panel. We still have enough time, so I will give the chance also to the audience to say the comments or to have questions. But before that, using my position, I can say a few words from my point of view about this issue. I am coming from Bosnia. Before the war, there was mediation about the solution. And even before the war, there was a proposal which was more or less similar like it is current Bosnia on the table. No one wanted to accept that, none of the sides. Why? First, it was left to not enough influential political figures. They were good to think about the solution, but they were not strong to implement that and pressing the local players to accept it. But the solution was, as I said, like we have it now. And the consequence of the war, 3% of the people was killed. It looks relatively small, but 100,000 people were killed in that war. 40% of the population was displaced. And 40 years after, we accepted what we had. Why? Because there was enough strong involvement of the key players. I think Bosnia is the last time where states, Russia, Europe were together. And because of that pressure, everything was implemented very quickly, and Bosnia is not a perfect country, it's not ideal, but I can't find any more successful example of that process after that. One of the most successful process. Do we have this situation now generally in the world? No, definitely not. Who is now interested to establish any serious group of the people to try to find solution in some areas with the conflict? Not too many. Honestly, it looks for me that all this small conflict looks like something which will Peter again attack me because of that, but it looks to me, I am against that. But it looks to me that we are very not so slowly, but even a little bit more fast coming to the situation of new Yalta. I hope not. Also, but let's be realistical. Who is now speaking with Russia about the peace? States and a little bit China, not to be too much involved. Big powers. What was reaction of the big powers regarding the Venezuela intervention from the other side? We are worried. And that's all. Slowly, I think they are trying to define their sphere, not of interest. They introduce now something which is sphere of security, which is area where they dominate. Is it good? I don't think that it's good, because then we all, small countries, including Europe, in that we are lost. We will not be the key players in that way. So I think that all of us finally have to start to speak and to criticize something which we don't believe is good. And of course, we need a leader in that process. The only leader which I see, and I think I am very naive, is European Union. Something which is based on the multilateral approach, something which is based on the compromise, and there is no successful example in the modern history than European Union of that approach. And I would like to see a European Union like a leader of all these countries who are trying to, let's say, to put the new world order based on rules on the table, and hope that that will be maybe the case. But for that, we need leaders with a vision. Do we have it? Recently, I think no. Because when I see some of the comments of the European leaders regarding some of the cases, I have to say that I am really disappointed with the lack of the courage to say what is the truth. But okay, too much from my side. Now I open the floor, so may the ladies have the first.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, you made here an incredible list of praises what Trump has done in the meantime. We as Europeans, we are a little bit frustrated because US had been a really steadfast ally of ours. And this, I think, has changed totally. If you look to the polls, you see that the Europeans are really very frustrated. They are deceived. And for instance, you say Russia is very aggressive. We think so too. Why leave us alone with Russia? I mean, Trump tries to find some solution, but in such a way that he really prefers nearly to work with Russia, uses Russia's conditions in the peace plan instead of working with the Europeans. It's true that we are weak because we haven't defended ourselves. There, I'm totally agreeable. But I think there also US once might need Europe because we are still an important economic bloc. And now what about all these tariffs? I mean, it's crazy what's going on. So we are not happy with that.
Thank you, Benita. Now, Volkan. And comments from our Sapa
Thank you.
will come later.
I think for the first time we're having a U.S. congressman in our family, it was very interesting to have you here, first of all, but also listening to what you are saying. My question, as a follow-up to the first question, is, as the former president of the UN General Assembly, what do you think President Trump's approach be for the United Nations future? And secondly, the oil imported from Venezuela, it is a low quality oil, and it actually fits the refineries in your region, the Houston refineries. So will it be a supply for the US needs, or will it be also available for the world oil consumption? Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, let me just say that, the General Keane, I was at the Warsaw Security Forum speaking there in the fall, and General Keane, who's the U.S. Representative to the war in Ukraine, he made a really good comment. He said, "Look, you Europeans, you actually could do a lot more than you think. You have enough F-35 jets that you can smoke the Russians. You can own the skies over Russia. They do not have the fifth generation fighter capability that the Europeans have. You have a military capability today and we continue to sell weapons to you guys. You guys are buying billions of, we're still trying to help you. I will say that your defense primes are way behind your purchases. So you look at your number one missile prime here in the French prime that sells missiles, Rheinmetall. They both have 6-year backlogs of orders. You guys are really behind in your ability to produce what your MODs are buying. But the United States is, and what General Keane said, we're not walking away from here. I mean, the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO is still an American. We still have U.S. troops in Poland, right? I mean, we're here. We are on the front lines. I mean, Trump moved them from Germany to Poland, right? Closer to the front, as it were. So we're not about to give up on Europe, but we want to see Europe do more to defend itself and to contribute more. And I mean, I will say as an American, I'm very happy to see the idea that you guys are moving to 5%, 5.5% GDP for defense. Now that's aspirational. It's in the future. But I think that's directionally where it needs to be. It's going to take you guys, the world weapons market. There's not enough weapons in the world to supply what Europe wants to buy right now. I'll make that comment. And then on the oil question, you're correct. The heavy crude from Venezuela, the U.S. actually has the heavy refining capacity for that. The U.S. currently is self-sufficient in its oil production. So I grew up in the oil fields of Midland, Texas, and Texas is a 5.4 million barrel a day state. In 2009, we were only a 900,000 barrel a day state. So we've had a dramatic increase in oil production in the United States because of technology, because we've invested in fracking, and that's been very successful. Clearly that oil is going to go to other parts of the world. We honestly don't need it at the present time. And on the United Nations, so Mike Walls and I came into Congress together. I have not spoken to him about this, but I think President Trump, look, he's coming to Davos next week. He's coming in force. And he's coming because he cares. If he didn't care about Europe, he wouldn't be here. I'm just going to point that out. If he didn't care about Europe, he wouldn't be coming to Davos next week, right? I mean, it's very logical. I think he's going to try to get some things that you guys aren't expecting. He's going to say some stuff that's going to drive all of us crazy, including me. But that's what he does. And at the end of the day, he's very effective at creating change and moving things. And he's here because he cares. I just don't. His presence tells you the actions are what you need to know.
Thank you. I just have a small comment. We are speaking more about the weapon expenditure for the military things, and the subject is peace, mediation in the world. But okay, just a comment. Petar.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I truly sympathize with essentially with what Van Taylor said. Really, I truly sympathize. And I understand better the American present political attitudes. But there are two things I would like to, frankly, if President Trump would have been president of United States in 1997, Ukraine would have never abandoned its nuclear weapon, becoming those weapons instantly Russian weapons, nuclear weapons. This is something to think about. It was a big mistake. We have the war now for more than 4 years because of that. The Russians could never, ever attack Ukraine Ukraine having nuclear weapons. That is the reality of power politics. But secondly, now, of course, we have to be grateful that President Trump pushed Europe and European Union, of course, and we are already on this track, on this road, to significantly have really capacity of defense of our own. We have to be grateful. But now I see only one way to express the ongoing developments about Greenland. And that is, I imagine the moment when a speech of President Trump saying, "Fellow Americans, I added 2.1 million square kilometers to the national territory of the United States of America." It's imparable. That's my view about Greenland.
Thank you, Mr. Ganem, please.
Thank you. I'll change the subject. So, and let me go back to something that Amre said when he gave the example of Gaza. Basically, since we're talking about peace, one of the things that I notice as an economist and as somebody who actually has been, for example, to Gaza many, many times, is that when we talk about reconstruction, building peace, we talk about building physical structures. So President Trump wants to build a casino, that's fine. Amre wants to build schools, that's fine too. But that is not what's going to bring about lasting peace. I've been to Gaza before the war, many times. And you see I saw a place that was going to explode. You don't need a PhD in economics. You did not need a PhD in economics to say Gaza was going to explode. Total blockade. It was described as the largest maximum security prison in the world. A poverty rate of around 70%, unemployment of 65%. You walked around Gaza City and there are all those young men who have gone to school, are educated, but have no jobs and are standing looking angry around the streets. So if we want lasting peace anywhere, I mean, I'm just using Gaza as an example, but I could say the same thing about Eastern DRC, is that you need to change the social contract. So before building anything, I mean, Gaza was rebuilt 4 times in the 21st century. This reconstruction that will come now will be the 5th Gaza reconstruction. So instead of, before throwing good money after bad, you need to deal with the crux of the problem. You need to remove the blockade. You need to open, to create jobs, to create opportunities. And what I'm saying, actually, what is interesting is that I'm not reinventing the wheel. This was being said by the quartet led by Tony Blair and my former boss, Jim Wolfenson, in 2005. And nobody followed them. And we are paying that price. So again, if you want peace, lasting peace anywhere, you need to deal with the drivers of the conflict to begin with.
Thank you. Rosen, last, and because I wanted to have chance for the participants to reply. But okay, shortly, Rosen and Jan, and that's over.
Very quickly, shortly but sharply, if you were the president, you ask yourself a question, what's a success for a president? And believe me, the success for a president is never measured by the size of a territory. It's never measured if you conquer somebody. It's never measured if you bomb somebody. It's not measured by the wars you win or lose. The success of a wise president is only measured by the success of ordinary people. And here you just continue thinking about that. My simple point is, I wonder the success of Switzerland because you don't know the name of their president, because it doesn't matter, because they have strong institutions that guarantee freedoms, rights, innovations to everyone, that give education, that give hope. Institution building is in the heart of a success of any president. It's not just bombing, dictating, and destroying. The success of a president is the success of ordinary people. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about the peace issue, if I may, because I was really impressed by the comments made by this panel. And I wanted to just highlight the importance of what Peter said in relation to the middle powers, because we've been concentrating on the large powers. And just to say a word or two about what happened in the Commonwealth, where I was Secretary General for 9 years. Because we had, of the 56 countries, we had different types of conflicts in 26 or 27 of those countries, all of which were resolved peacefully and quietly. And that teaches us something really important, to take Anna's point about courage and going in early and listening and working together. And one of the things that also echoed with me is this idea that justice is absolutely fundamental in terms of the process in order to get an agreed outcome. The Commonwealth has equality in as much as there's no weighted voting. Every single member, no matter how big or how small, has the same power, but also that it's done quietly. One of the comments that have been made to me is that nobody knows that there were 26 conflicts which were resolved, and therefore that is a failing. I actually think it's a benefit for this reason. Had we gone in with ego, we would not have got the result. The fact that we facilitated the settlement between the people themselves guaranteed they owned the success, and we avoided war. We avoided the outcome which would be rejected by the people. So I think it's really important for us to focus on equality of process, of respect for individuals, and the ability to listen. And that's what frightens me. And I was listening to the panel, it's coming through many, that we're not listening to each other, because there are three levels in my view. There are what people say, and then there's what people mean, and then that's what people will do. And I think we have to concentrate not on what just people are saying, but really listen to what do they mean. Because unless we listen to what we mean, we will not get the resolutions. So I think there are an opportunity for us not to look at the big conflicts, but look at the way in which conflicts have been resolutely addressed early, with the focus on solutions, not, as Amre said, just in terms of containment, because you have to know what success looks like in order to plan for it and deliver it. And what I will tell you, having had the privilege of working on these issues for 9 years, is that it is possible, but you have to have respect, and you have to listen, and you have to deliver. And I think we can do this if we choose. And I think Anna is right, it is about choosing, but it's about all of us. And I also think that it's really important that we have that diversity of view, because our world is diverse. We're not monocultural, we are complex and interdependent, and it's doable.
Thank you. And the last speaker, Jan. I have to close.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mladen. Just some words or some remarks or comments. At the end of 2012, I had almost 1 hour lasting conversation with John McCain in the premises of the American Congress, the Capitol in Washington. And I could extract 2 messages from his side he sent to me. The first was, Russia is the real threat. And you, as Europeans, underestimate it. You close your eyes looking at it in this phenomenon. And the second message was, please don't forget that the Euro-Atlantic cooperation is the backbone of the modern civilization. That's not about competing, that's not about racing or something, it's about actually cooperation between the US and Europeans, European Union. And now what we see as what Trump is declaring, so can I think that it's rubbish? What McCain said 12 years, 13 years before? I don't see like it. And that's not only the message that Trump is sending to Europe, please wake up and increase your military expenditures, please wake up and increase the share of the military expenditures on the total GDP and so on. That's nice, and that's right. But on the hand, what Trump is saying, we will, and it's the part of the security strategy of the US currently, we clearly will support the regimes and the governments in Europe which are trying to fragment European Union. And it's the same what I'm listening from Russia, what I'm hearing from Russia, from Vladimir Vladimirovich sitting in Kremlin. And for me, that's something badly unimaginable. That the similar voices aiming to the more fragmenting of European Union, which is suffering with the fragmenting currently, that the voices are so sound so closely. So please, I would like to understand, that's the question to the Mr. Taylor, Senator Taylor, what's the opinion without that? That's not only about military expenditures, and it's clearly the philosophical attitude of the American leader, current American leader to Europe, to European Union. And what do you expect from Europe? And how do you see the role of the European Union in this current very badly ill world? So I refer to what Madame Wagner said as in the first intervention in the debate, and I fully agree with you.
Thank you. Now, okay, I would like to ask the participants who would like to respond to something. Anna? Yeah. That's this side. Okay.
Thank you very much. And firstly, really thank you for this great start of today. I'm just going to share with you from my own experience, because I think it's always very useful to share from the experiences you have. And I have to fully declare, I'm one of the politicians in Romania who gave up a good career on Wall Street, come back to Romania in 2003 and be on the team that got Romania into the EU and NATO. So I'm a very pro-European and pro-NATO person. But likewise, from the very beginning, I always said, and I assumed, even though I've been attacked so many times, that for Romania, for example, the strategic partnership with the United States is the pillar of our foreign policy and security. And with that in mind, I always defended that strategic partnership because, as I said, it's a matter of security of Romania as well. So with that in mind, I do remember, and I am the only politician who actually was dealing directly with the first Trump administration at the highest level, getting good stuff for Romania, strategic projects, at a time when we were showing that actually, as you mentioned, Mr. President, earlier, the threat always been not just China, but Russia as well. And I do remember, and this is very good to remember because that's the track record, when in Brussels, it was me as a deputy prime minister and the prime minister of Poland at that time arguing about the Nord Stream 2 and about taking the energy away from Putin's hands because it's going to be used as a weapon. And guess what? We were right. At that time, on and off the record, there's been many, many discussions where, you know, people were saying, well, it's not that the case. I'm not going to give names, but, you know, it was a certain country, Germany, to say it rightly, you know, and that's a problem of the EU at the present moment, this frustration of having double, triple standards, okay? Not really be consistent. We have here an amazing lady who was pushing for the enlargement, you know? She was trying really hard to really strengthen the power of the EU, because I'm sick and tired how many times I had it in my talking points about EU being the global power. Guess what? Are we a global power? No, if we are honest about it. Can we be? Yes, definitely yes. But for that, it has to be, you know, those double, triple standards needs to be stopped once for all, unless we understand this and unless we will have the courage. Then I go back to another job I had. Guess what? And married to a Brit, imagine how that was going in my whole house. You know, I have a WhatsApp with my husband and our son. He was the administrator, our son. So the minute in 2017 I was Minister for European Affairs, guess what? With Brexit on my head. So my son actually changed the WhatsApp name and said Brexit 1.0. So I had countries coming to our, you know, to me, saying, we really need to take this great opportunity now to stick it to the Brits, you know? End of quotation. That was the environment, okay? Let's really have our historical chance now to really have a go at the Brits. You know what I said? I said, firstly, Britain is leaving the EU, stupidly on their side. That's my view, and I always express it. I think it was a really huge mistake. And it's a lesson when the internal party politics is playing to the national politics, okay? And that referendum, it's an example how people were misled because they were voted for something that actually I'm not so sure they understood the whole implications, but that's another discussion. But you know, Britain was leaving the EU, but was never leaving the Europe. So, you know, and particularly to Romania, I was mentioning and saying, when you are going to take care of my security when it comes to the air policing, then we can talk. Until then, you know what, UK is taking care of our security. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, we can sit here and we can blame portions, but you know what, if we end up here, are we going to really learn the lessons from the past, to really not allow those mistakes from the past to poison the present and destroying the future? Because if we are going to do this, yes, President Trump has its style of saying things directly. But you know what? Those things has been going on and has been said in one form or another by everybody. It's up to us now, if we go to the European Union and to Europe, if we are going to really, if I was now in Europe, I will strengthen the strategic partnership with US. That will be, are we going to look back at the TTIP? Who destroyed the TTIP? You know, the transatlantic, because that was a very, very good, when was it destroyed? In 2015-16. Whose fault was that? Certainly not the United States. So, you know, those are the hard lessons if we want to really learn them and to build the present and the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So with this, I will conclude this panel. Thank you all participants, and thank to all of you, because I think it was very, very lively discussion. Next panel.